The millionaire nearly fainted when he saw the lifeless baby in his arms. Nothing could wake him. His fiancée kept saying it was just exhaustion. But the little girl he'd always helped came running, pale, gripping his hand and whispering, "Uncle, look what she's hiding in her pocket. She put this on your baby's arm." He wants to deny it, wants to trust the woman he loves, but fear speaks louder. When he finally dares to look, something falls from her pocket, something that changes everything. And what happens next is even worse. Who can he trust now? The silence in Arthur's estate was so profound that he could hear the pounding of his own heart, an anxious drum marking the rhythm of his worries. Sitting in his leather armchair, eyes fixed on the baby monitor screen, he watched Leo's soft, rhythmic breathing. Each inhale of the little boy, a miracle, each exhale, a relief. To the world, Arthur was a man of unshakable success, a multimillionaire whose life was an example of order and control. But here, in the stillness of his fortress of glass and steel, he was just a father, terrified by the fragility of the small life that depended entirely on him. The fear of failing was a constant shadow, a whisper reminding him that all his money couldn't buy the certainty that he was doing enough, that he was a good enough father. His eyes shifted from the screen and wandered toward the immaculate garden, where the roses, pruned to perfection, looked like velvet red sculptures. Near the wrought iron gate, a tiny figure was sitting on the curb, huddled like a little bird. It was Lily. For months, Arthur had maintained an unspoken ritual with her. Every afternoon, he would leave a small package near the fence, a sandwich, a piece of fruit, sometimes a juice box and a few dollars. They never exchanged a word. He would simply leave the package and retreat. She, with her large, watchful eyes, would wait for him to go inside before approaching, taking the gift with silent gratitude and disappearing. It was a silent pact, a way to connect with a world he always observed from a distance, a gesture to quiet the guilt he felt for having so much while others had nothing. The soft chime of his cell phone pulled him from his thoughts. The name Isabella glowed on the screen, accompanied by a picture where she smiled, a smile that seemed capable of illuminating any darkness. Isabella had entered his life like a soft melody, filling the void with her elegance, her intelligence, and above all, her apparent devotion to Leo. She was the missing piece, the promise of a complete family, the partner he believed he needed to be the father his son deserved. She understood his insecurities, calmed his fears, and seemed to have a solution for everything. Her presence was a balm, and he allowed himself to sink into that sense of comfort, ignoring the small voice in his mind that warned him to be cautious. Trust was difficult, but Isabella made everything so easy. The doorbell rang, punctual as always. Arthur stood up, adjusting his shirt collar, and went to open the door. There she was, radiant. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant updo, and her sky-blue linen dress seemed to float around her. "Darling," she said, her voice velvety, placing a soft kiss on his cheek. "How is our little angel?" "Sleeping. He had a quiet day," Arthur replied. Feeling the tension in his shoulders decrease slightly, Isabella stepped inside, her floral perfume filling the air. She glanced toward the staircase leading to Leo's room. "I'll go up and peek at him. I want to make sure he's tucked in properly. Sometimes he moves and the blanket shifts." Arthur nodded, grateful for that care he saw as the purest expression of maternal love. He watched her ascend the marble steps, her footsteps light and silent. A wave of relief washed over him. Maybe, finally, he could relax. Maybe Isabella was the answer to all his prayers. He turned to the window, expecting to see the spot where Lily usually sat, but the girl was gone. Only the crumpled sandwich wrapper remained, carried by the gentle afternoon breeze. Upstairs, The door to Leo's room opened and closed with an almost inaudible click. Arthur felt a sudden chill, a strange and inexplicable spike of apprehension that he couldn't decipher. The tranquility lasted only a moment. A sharp cry, different from any sound Arthur had ever heard from his son, cut through the air and ran up his spine like a jolt of pure dread. It wasn't a cry of hunger or a soiled diaper. It was a thin, weak wail that dissolved into an even more alarming silence. He dropped his glass of water on the table with a dull thud and bolted up the stairs, his heart hammering against his ribs. He pushed open the door to Leo's room and found Isabella beside the crib, wearing an expression of serene concern. The baby was quiet, too pale, his eyes closed in a way that didn't look natural. Arthur approached, panic tightening in his throat. Leo wasn't moving. He was deeply asleep, but it was a heavy, inert sleep that didn't respond to his touches. "He won't wake up, Isabella." Arthur's voice was a rough whisper, laden with desperation. He touched his son's face, called his name, gently shook the crib with a delicacy that contradicted the chaos in his mind. Nothing. Leo remained motionless, immersed in that strange, deep slumber. "Calm down, sweetheart. He must be exhausted. He played hard today," Isabella said, her voice a tranquil balm that for a moment seemed the most sensible thing in the world. She placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder, a gesture of comfort he almost accepted. It was then that a small figure bolted across the garden and burst through the back door, which a gardener had left ajar. It was Lily. Barefoot, her face smudged with dust and tears, she ran down the hallway and stopped at the bedroom door, her ragged breathing forming small clouds in the cool air. Her large, frightened eyes fixed first on the baby, then on Arthur, and finally on Isabella, who stared back with cold, calculated surprise. The girl clutched the hem of her worn dress so tightly that her knuckles were white. She pointed a trembling hand. "Mister, look what she's holding. She put that on your baby's arm." The sentence dropped like a stone into the tense silence. Arthur turned his head, following the girl's finger. In one of Isabella's hands, semi-hidden by the skirt of her dress, was a small glass vial that glittered under the soft lamplight. The air seemed to thicken. His mind refused to connect the dots, to accept the terrible implication of those words. Isabella reacted with theatrical perfection. Her eyes widened in shock, and she held out her hand, displaying the vial as if it were proof of her innocence. "What is this? Darling, this is a gentle supplement, just some herbs to help the baby relax. I was just coming to show you to explain everything," she said, her voice choked with feigned hurt. "How dare this girl?" "I saw it," Lily insisted, taking a step forward. "She rubbed it on his little arm when you weren't looking. Right after that, he went like this." The raw, direct accusation hung between them. Arthur looked at the sincere, desperate face of the girl he helped from afar, and then at the wounded, offended face of the woman he was starting to love. His head spun. It was impossible. Isabella would never harm Leo. She loved him. But the conviction in Lily's eyes was undeniable. Then, Isabella's mastery revealed itself. Tears welled up in her eyes, streaming down her flawless face. "Arthur, I only wanted to help. You know how worried I get about his well-being." Her voice cracked. "This girl, maybe she's confused, or perhaps she's afraid of losing your attention now that I'm here. Children invent things out of jealousy, darling. It's sad, but it happens." The suggestion was a poisoned arrow, striking Arthur at his weakest point, his own insecurity. He looked at Lily, a street kid, and then at Isabella, the epitome of sophistication and care. Whom should he believe? Doubt paralyzed him. But Isabella's logic, however cruel, sounded plausible in his tormented mind. He needed an explanation, and hers was the easiest to accept. With a heavy gesture, he called the security detail on the intercom. Please escort the girl off the property and ensure she doesn't enter again. Lily stared at him, her eyes filling with a pain that pierced him. She didn't say another word. She simply allowed the man to lead her away, casting one final pleading glance toward the sleeping baby. Watching her disappear, Arthur felt a knot in his stomach, the terrible sensation that he had just made an irreparable mistake. In the days that followed, Arthur's estate transformed into a stage of silent anxiety. The memory of Lily's hurt face haunted him, a persistent image that refused to vanish. He tried to convince himself that he had made the right decision, that Isabella's explanation was the only logical one. After all, why would she do anything to harm Leo? She loved him, demonstrating it in every gesture, in every word of affection. The suggestion that a street child, motivated by jealousy, could have invented such a story seemed, in his moments of forced rationality, the most probable conclusion. However, the seed of doubt had been planted, and its roots began to spread through his mind, thin and poisonous. Leo's episodes of discomfort became more frequent, and strangely, they always happened at opportune times. One afternoon, while Arthur was on an important video conference, the baby's weak cry began to echo through the house. He requested a pause, his heart already racing, and ran to the room. He found Leo pale and lethargic, with a cold sweat on his forehead. Isabella was already there, as always, with a damp compress in her hand. He had a slight fever, dear, but don't worry, I took care of everything, she said, with the calm of an experienced nurse. She pulled a small velvet pouch she always carried and took out a dropper with a colorless liquid. It's just an electrolyte solution with chamomile. It soothes his stomach and hydrates him. She administered a few drops into the baby's mouth. Arthur watched, tense and helpless. Within minutes, the color returned to Leo's face. He sighed, relaxed, and went back to sleep. This time, a peaceful, natural sleep. The gratitude Arthur felt was so overwhelming that it nearly erased the doubt that gnawed at him. Isabella was his savior, his son's guardian. Every episode she resolved with her serene efficiency reinforced his trust in her, and consequently pushed him further away from the memory of Lily's accusation. The girl, he thought with a pang in his chest, must truly have been confused. Meanwhile, outside the gilded gates, Lily watched. She didn't give up. She saw the house routine unfold, saw Isabella arriving and leaving with her perfect smile, saw doctors' cars making increasingly frequent visits. Leo's tests never revealed anything. Doctors were perplexed, attributing the symptoms to atypical colic or an unknown sensitivity. Lily knew the truth, but her voice had been silenced. She tried to approach the cook, a kind-hearted woman named Mrs. Henderson, but the woman, though sympathetic, was clearly instructed not to speak with her. "That girl keeps lingering around here," Isabella commented one evening as they dined. Her voice was soft, tinged with feigned concern. "I spoke to the security team. I told them to be careful, of course, but not to let her get close. We don't want her frightening Leo again, do we? Or inventing more stories. I heard from a neighbor that she seems a bit, unstable." The word unstable lodged in Arthur's mind. It was a subtle and effective way to discredit Lily completely, transforming her from a witness into a threat. He nodded in agreement, feeling like a traitor. He was allowing the reputation of a defenseless child to be stained to protect his own peace of mind. Every improvement in Leo's condition under Isabella's care was another nail in the coffin of Lily's credibility. He was becoming an accomplice to an injustice, but the paralyzing fear of losing his son was greater than his conscience. He chose to believe the comfortable lie instead of the disturbing truth. On the other side of the wall, Lily felt the cold night in her bones, but the determination in her eyes was a flame that refused to be extinguished. She needed to find a way to show Arthur the truth before it was too late. Lily knew that words wouldn't be enough. The image of Arthur's face, split between confusion and disappointment, was etched in her memory. She needed something concrete, proof he couldn't ignore. Hidden behind a thicket of gardenias bordering the mansion wall, she became a patient observer, studying the house's patterns with a detective's attention. She mentally noted the times when the gardeners took their breaks, the hour the delivery truck arrived, and most importantly, the moments when Isabella was alone with Leo. One day, as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn, she saw her chance. Isabella had taken the stroller into the garden, positioning it under the shade of an old oak tree. She sat on a nearby bench, engrossed in her phone. Lily crawled along the side of the wall, using the dense foliage as cover, until she reached a small glass conservatory where Mrs. Henderson cultivated her herbs. The door was always ajar for ventilation. With her heart pounding erratically, she slipped inside, the smell of damp earth and basil filling the air. From there, she had a clear, though partial view of the garden. She watched Isabella stand up and walk over to the stroller. With a quick, discreet motion, the woman pulled the small velvet pouch from her purse. Lily held her breath. It was the same pouch she had seen in Leo's room. Isabella looked around, ensuring no one was watching. Then she pulled out of it not the dropper, but a small vial identical to the one Lily had seen before, and a moistened wipe. With calculated delicacy, she rubbed the wipe on the baby's wrist, a gesture that could easily be mistaken for cleaning. The child, who was just starting to stir, immediately quieted, his eyes heavy, his mouth opening in a sleepy yawn. Isabella smiled, put the vial away, and sat back down, satisfied. A shiver ran through Lily's body. She had seen it. She had seen it again. But how to prove it? Who would believe her? Frustration burned in her chest. She needed to get closer. She needed something she could show Arthur. Her attention turned to Isabella's purse, left carelessly on the bench. Maybe if she could grab that vial. The idea was risky, bordering on madness. But what else could she do? She waited until Isabella stood up again to answer a call, moving several feet away from the bench. It was now or never. With the agility of a cat, Lily slipped out of the conservatory, running low next to the bushes. Her heart felt like it would explode. She reached the bench, her hand trembling as she reached for the purse. Her fingers brushed the soft fabric of the small velvet pouch. She was almost there. Suddenly, a loud, sharp bark made her freeze. Hercules, the family's guard dog, who usually stayed in another part of the property, appeared out of nowhere, running toward her. He wasn't aggressive, but his bark was a deafening alarm. Isabella turned, earphones still to her ear, and her eyes widened when she saw Lily near her belongings. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, her voice cutting like glass. "Security!" Lily recoiled, panic overwhelming her. She hadn't managed to grab the vial. Now she just looked like a thief. The security guard appeared in seconds, grabbing her arm with unnecessary force. "I wasn't going to steal anything. Adun, she tried to explain, but the words died in her throat. "Take her away," Isabella ordered, her face a mask of controlled fury. "And make sure she never steps foot on this property again. I will speak to Mr. Arthur myself about this. This girl is a danger." Dragged away, Lily looked back and saw Isabella picking up the velvet pouch, an almost imperceptible smile of triumph on her lips. She had failed. Worse than that, she had given Isabella exactly what she wanted, more proof that Lily was a problem child, someone whose word meant nothing. The feeling of defeat was bitter, but amidst the despair, a new resolution formed. She wouldn't give up. She just needed to be smarter. Isabella's narrative about the incident in the garden was a masterpiece of manipulation. She told Arthur not with anger, but with profound sadness, as if her heart were broken by the depravity of that poor girl. "I saw her near my things, darling," she said. Her voice choked as she adjusted Leo's pillow in the crib. She was trying to take my wallet. When I confronted her, she got aggressive. I'm truly heartbroken. I tried to have compassion, but now I'm scared. Scared for Leo. Arthur listened, his stomach churning in a knot of conflict. Isabella's story fit perfectly with the image she had been building of Lily, an unstable and unpredictable child. Every word she spoke was another nail, sealing the door on the trust he once felt for the girl. Cold logic told him Isabella was right. He had responsibilities. His son's safety was the top priority. And yet, the image of Lily's frightened eyes, being dragged away by the guard, tormented him. There was more desperation than malice in her look. In the following days, the atmosphere in the estate grew even tenser. Arthur found himself increasingly dependent on Isabella. Leo's episodes of discomfort continued, unpredictable and frightening. On a particularly bad night, the baby cried for hours, inconsolable. Arthur tried everything. He rocked him, sang to him, checked his temperature dozens of times. Nothing worked. Despair consumed him, making him feel like the most incompetent father in the world. That was when Isabella, who had insisted on staying the night to help, entered the room. She appeared calm and in control, a beacon of serenity amidst his storm of panic. "Let me try." "Arthur," she said softly, taking Leo from his arms, "you need rest. You're exhausted." He yielded, feeling like a failure. He sat in the corner armchair, watching as Isabella rocked the baby. She murmured a lullaby and, with a movement he barely noticed, administered the chamomile drops from her small pouch. Like magic, Leo's crying subsided, turning into soft sobs, and finally, into quiet breathing. He fell asleep in her arms. "See," Isabella whispered, smiling at Arthur, "he just needed a calmer touch. You get so nervous, and they feel that." Guilt hit him like a punch. She was right. His anxiety was probably making things worse. He was the problem. Isabella, on the other hand, was the solution. His gratitude for her deepened, turning into an emotional dependence that blinded him to any other possibility. He stopped looking toward the gate, expecting to see Lily's small figure. He banished her memory, classifying her as a lapse in judgment, a dangerous distraction. Meanwhile, Mrs. Henderson, the cook, began noticing strange things. She found a small, sweetened, chemical-smelling wipe dropped near the conservatory. On another occasion, she saw Isabella hastily discarding a small, empty glass vial in the kitchen trash, hiding it under vegetable scraps. Mrs. Henderson was a simple but observant woman. She remembered the distress on Lily's face and the way the girl always looked at the baby with genuine tenderness. Something wasn't right. Her instincts, honed by decades of life experience, told her that Isabella's perfection was a facade. However, she was just an employee. What could she say? To whom? Arthur barely noticed her, and Isabella was the lady of the house. She kept her suspicions to herself, but her eyes became more watchful, her distrust a silent ember waiting for oxygen to become a flame. She began to observe, memorizing small details, feeling that, soon, those loose pieces might form a very disturbing picture. Mrs. Henderson didn't know what to do, but she knew she needed to stay alert. The well-being of that little angel depended on it. Isabella's web tightened around Arthur, subtly isolating him from everything and everyone. She began managing his schedule, filtering his calls and emails under the pretext of helping him focus on what truly matters, Leo. Longtime friends who called for updates were met by Isabella's sweet voice, who explained that Arthur was a bit overwhelmed and would return the call later, a return that never happened. Important documents in his office moved, folders disappeared and reappeared, creating a fog of confusion that made him doubt his own memory. "Darling, you left this contract in the sock drawer," she'd say, with an indulgent smile, handing him a file he was certain he'd left on the desk. "You're so tired. You need me to keep things in order." he believed her. Emotional exhaustion and constant worry about Leo made him vulnerable, and Isabella's efficiency seemed to be the only solid thing in his chaotic world. She became indispensable, not just for the baby, but for him too. He started delegating decisions, trusting her judgment, seeing the world through her eyes. His life, once meticulously controlled, was now orchestrated by her, and he felt grateful for it. Lily, in turn, was at her lowest point. Expelled from the property and labeled a thief, she lost her only vantage point. She spent her days wandering the nearby streets, her stomach growling, her heart heavy with helplessness. The image of little Leo, pale and drowsy, haunted her. She knew with a visceral certainty that the baby was in danger. But how could she reach Arthur now? Every door was closed, every face at the mansion instructed to ignore her. One afternoon, sitting on a park bench a few blocks from the estate, she saw Mrs. Henderson leaving a small market. A spark of hope ignited. The cook always had a kind look. Maybe, just maybe, she would listen. Lily ran, breathless, and stopped in front of the woman. "Mrs. Henderson, please, you have to listen to me." The cook stopped, startled. She looked around nervously as if afraid of being seen. "Girl, I can't talk to you. I have orders. It's about the baby," Lily whispered, her eyes pleading. "That woman, she's hurting him. I saw it. She rubbed something on his little arm from a small vial. He gets sick right after." Mrs. Henderson stared at her, and for an instant, Lily saw a flicker of recognition in the woman's gaze. The pieces clicked into place in the cook's mind. The strange-smelling wipe, the discarded vial, the girl's distress. Everything made terrifying sense. "I didn't see any of that," Mrs. Henderson said, but her voice lacked conviction. Her eyes said otherwise. "You can't keep looking for me, child. It's dangerous for both of us." She hurried away, leaving Lily standing on the sidewalk, her heart sinking. The last hope seemed to have faded. Mrs. Henderson, even if she suspected something, was afraid. Afraid of losing her job, afraid of getting involved. Lily was alone. That night, a cold rain began to fall. Huddled under the awning of a closed store, Lily shivered, not just from the cold, but from desperation. She closed her eyes and thought of Arthur. She remembered the first day he left the sandwich by the gate. He hadn't seen her, but she had seen him through the railing. He had a sad look, the look of a man carrying the world on his shoulders. She felt a connection to that sadness. He was a good man, she knew. He was just blind, blinded by grief and the manipulation of a very clever woman. A new wave of determination warmed her. If no one would believe her, she would have to find a way to make Arthur see the truth with his own eyes. No matter how risky it was, she couldn't give up on Leo, nor on the sad-eyed man who, unknowingly, had helped her so many times. Lily's opportunity arose in an unexpected way, shrouded in the mist of a cold Saturday morning. The day of Arthur's annual company charity gala had arrived, a grand event to be held in the mansion gardens. Catering trucks drove in and out, florists decorated the lawn with lavish arrangements, and a team of waiters hurried about. Amidst the organized chaos, security was more focused on preparations than on perimeter breaches. For Lily, that commotion was the perfect cover. Hidden, she watched a beverage delivery truck park near the service gates. As the loaders carried boxes inside, she snuck around the back of the vehicle, squeezing into a tight space between empty crates. Her heart pounded like a drum, but fear was overcome by the urgency of her mission. The truck entered the property and parked near the kitchen. Lily waited for the right moment, and when the drivers moved away, she jumped out, running to the nearest refuge, the glass conservatory. Inside, among the pots of rosemary and mint, she felt safe, invisible. From there, she could observe the activity in the house. Hours passed. The sun began to set, and the garden lights came on, transforming the place into a fairy tale setting. Guests began to arrive, dressed in formal attire, their laughter echoing in the air. Arthur circulated among them, a forced smile on his face. Leo was upstairs with a hired nanny for the evening. Isabella was by Arthur's side, stunning in a red dress, playing the perfect hostess with impeccable grace. She was the center of attention, charming and articulate, already presenting herself as the future lady of the estate. Lily knew she needed to find irrefutable proof, and her intuition told her the answer lay in Isabella's small velvet pouch. The woman carried it like an extension of herself. Suddenly, Lily saw her excuse herself from a group of guests and ascend the stairs. The nanny came down immediately after, heading toward the kitchen to fetch something. The upstairs floor was momentarily empty, except for Isabella and Leo. A chill ran through Lily. Something was about to happen. She crept out of the conservatory and, using the shadows projected by the bushes, circled the house to an ivy trellis that climbed the side wall, right beneath the window of Arthur's bedroom, which was next to Leo's. The window was slightly ajar to let in the cool air. With an agility that life on the streets had given her, she began to climb. Her small fingers found purchase in the thick leaves and branches. She reached the window and looked inside. What she saw made her freeze. Isabella was not soothing Leo. She was in front of Arthur's safe, which was hidden behind a framed painting. The safe door was open. With quick, precise movements, she photographed documents with her cell phone and placed some jewelry, which Lily recognized as belonging to Arthur's deceased mother from photos he kept in the living room, inside her purse. There was no maternal care in her actions, only the coldness of a thief. The baby in the next room was absolutely silent. The realization hit Lily with the force of a punch. This wasn't just about manipulating Arthur emotionally. It was about something much larger, more calculated. Leo's recurring sickness was the perfect distraction, the smokescreen for her true plans. She needed to warn Arthur, but how? If she screamed, she would be caught, and no one would believe her wild story. Then Isabella closed the safe, replaced the painting, and picked up a small object from the dresser, a digital voice recorder that Arthur used for business notes. She turned it on, whispered something into it, and tucked it into her purse, along with the jewels. Then she left the room, closing the door silently. Lily remained paralyzed for a second, her mind reeling. She had no proof of what Isabella had just done. But then her eyes fell on something the woman had left behind, dropped on the carpet near the safe, a tiny pearl earring, which must have come loose from her ear during her hasty movements. It was small, almost insignificant, but it was evidence, proof that she had been there. With her heart in her mouth, Lily squeezed through the window, snatched the earring, and retreated to the trellis. The cold metal pressed against her palm. The party downstairs continued, oblivious to the drama unfolding, but the course of that night had changed forever. With the tiny pearl earring firmly clenched in her hand, Lily descended the trellis with desperate caution. The cold metal was the only tangible evidence of what she had just witnessed, a small anchor of truth in a sea of lies. She needed to give that to Arthur, but the gala was an impenetrable fortress of elegant adults and watchful security guards. Any attempt to approach him directly would result in her immediate expulsion. Her gaze swept over the illuminated garden and landed on the kitchen. The back doors were constantly opening and closing with the coming and going of waiters. It was her only chance. She sneaked toward it, her heart hammering against her ribs. She saw Mrs. Henderson with her back to her, coordinating the catering team. Lily waited for a distraction, a waiter who dropped a tray of glasses, causing a loud crash, and darted inside, quick as a mouse. She touched the cook's arm. "Mrs. Henderson," she whispered, her voice urgent. The woman spun around, her eyes widening in surprise and disapproval. "Girl, have you lost your mind? Get out of here now. Please, you have to help me. You're the only one who can." Lily opened her hand, revealing the earring. This is hers, Isabella's. It fell on the floor in the boss's room near the safe. She was in there, messing with everything. Mrs. Henderson's face paled. She recognized the earring. Isabella had worn it that very evening. The girl's absurd story, which had previously sounded like a child's delusion, now connected with her own suspicions in an alarming way. The safe. The mention of the safe sounded an internal alarm. She looked at Lily's desperate expression, at the raw sincerity in her eyes, and doubt gave way to conviction. "What do you want me to do?" the cook asked, her voice low and tense. "Give this to Mr. Arthur. Tell him where you found it. He needs to know. He has to go upstairs right now." Mrs. Henderson hesitated. It was an enormous risk. She could lose her job, her reputation. But then she thought of little Leo, so defenseless, and the lost look on her employer's face. Loyalty to the family she had served for years spoke loudest. "Wait here. Hide behind that cabinet and don't make a sound," she ordered. With the earring hidden in her apron pocket, Mrs. Henderson went out to the hall. Her heart thumped heavily. She spotted Arthur near the bar, laughing at a joke told by a business partner. He looked exhausted beneath the smile. She approached, clearing her throat. "Mr. Arthur, excuse me. May I have a word? It's urgent." Arthur turned, surprised to see her there. "Henderson, is something wrong?" "We should talk in private, sir." He followed her to a more secluded corner. Mrs. Henderson took a deep breath and pulled the earring from her pocket. "I found this, sir, on your bedroom floor, near the painting that hides the safe." Arthur frowned, confused. He took the earring. He recognized it instantly. "It's Isabella's. What was it doing in my room?" "Sir, the girl, Lily. She's here. She gave it to me. She said she saw Miss Isabella going through your safe." Arthur's world seemed to tilt on its axis. The accusation was so serious, so surreal, that his first reaction was disbelief. Lily, her again. Was the girl so desperate for attention that she would invent such a calumny? But then he looked at the serious face of Mrs. Henderson, a woman who had known him since childhood, whose loyalty was unquestionable. And there was the earring. How could Lily have gotten it if she hadn't been there? "Where is she?" he asked, his voice cold as steel, hidden in the kitchen. At that moment, Isabella approached, her smile radiant. "Darling, everyone's looking for you. What's going on?" She paused when she saw the earring in his hand. "My earring! Where did you find it? I must have lost it." "Henderson found it. In my room, near the safe," Arthur said, his eyes fixed on hers, searching for any sign of deception. Isabella's smile flickered for a fraction of a second, imperceptible to most, but not to him. "In your room? That's odd. I must have gone in to grab a tissue and it must have fallen. You know how clumsy I am." She laughed, a slightly forced sound. "Now come on, they're waiting for us." She tried to take his arm, but he didn't move. The seed of doubt, which he had tried so hard to crush, sprouted with violent force. Something was terribly wrong. He needed to see with his own eyes. "Wait here," he said. His voice clipped and walked toward the house, leaving Isabella and a perplexed Mrs. Henderson behind. Arthur took the marble stairs 2 steps at a time, the sound of his shoes echoing in the silence upstairs. The noise of the party seemed distant, a muffled murmur from a world that no longer belonged to him. His mind was a whirlwind of denial and fear. Lily's accusation, corroborated by the inexplicable presence of the earring, was a direct hit to his carefully constructed reality. He wanted it to be a lie. He needed it to be a lie. The alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. He entered his room, his heart pounding uncontrollably. The room was in perfect order, exactly as the maid had left it that morning. Nothing seemed out of place. He walked to the painting, an oil landscape that belonged to his father, and took it off the wall. The safe was there, closed. The small green light indicated it was locked. With trembling hands, he entered the code. The door opened with a soft click. At first glance, everything seemed normal, the stacks of documents, the titled folders. But Arthur knew the contents of that safe like the back of his hand. There was an order, a logic that only he understood. He started searching. The envelope with the deeds to his country house was not in its usual position. The small blue velvet box containing his mother's jewelry was slightly displaced. He opened it. The pearl necklace, the most valuable piece, was there, but the diamond earrings and a sapphire brooch were gone. A freezing chill spread through his chest. He felt like a fool, a complete and utter fool. How could he have been so blind? The calculated kindness, the excessive worry, the way Isabella had become the center of his universe. It all took on a new and sinister perspective. The image of her caring for Leo, which had once brought him such comfort, now transformed into a scene of wicked manipulation. His son's illness. Could it be possible? His mind refused to take the next logical step, to connect the dots of that monstrous puzzle. He closed the safe, the metallic sound ending a chapter of his life. He sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands, trying to breathe. Guilt crushed him. Guilt for doubting Lily, for kicking her out, for discrediting her. The sincerity in that girl's eyes was the only true thing he had encountered in months, and he had rejected it. His eyes wandered around the room and landed on his desk. The small digital voice recorder he used constantly was not in its usual place. He looked for it in the drawers, in his jacket pocket, but couldn't find it. He then remembered what Lily had told Mrs. Henderson, something the cook hadn't related in detail, that Isabella had hidden something in her purse. Could it be the recorder? Why would she take it? A noise in the hallway pulled him from his thoughts. The door opened and Isabella entered, a tense smile on her face. "Arthur, what are you doing up here for so long?" "I was worried." "I am also worried, Isabella," he said, his voice low and controlled, but charged with a cold fury. "Worried about things that are disappearing from my safe." The color drained from her face. The mask of innocence cracked, revealing the coldness underneath. "What are you talking about? Are you accusing me of something? Where are my mother's jewels? Where is my voice recorder?" He stood up, approaching her. "I don't know what you're talking about." She backed away, her voice rising an octave. "It must be that girl. She must have come in here, stolen your things and planted my earring to frame me. It's obvious." The lie was so audacious, so desperate, that Arthur almost laughed. But the mention of Lily ignited something inside him. He needed to talk to her, needed to hear the whole story, unfiltered, without the venom of Isabella's manipulations. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice hard. "I don't know. I sent her away." Arthur stormed past her, running down the stairs. He no longer cared about the party, the guests, the appearances. The only thing that mattered was finding the girl he had betrayed and discovering the full extent of the nightmare he had plunged into. He burst into the kitchen, his face a mask of urgency. "Henderson, where is she?" The cook pointed to the pantry cabinet. Arthur approached and opened the door. Lily was there, huddled, her eyes wide with fear. He knelt down, his heart breaking at the terror on her face. "Lily," his voice failed. "Forgive me. Please tell me everything." In the silent pantry, surrounded by the smell of spices and flour, the outside world seemed to vanish. The murmuring of the party was a distant, irrelevant echo. Arthur remained kneeling before Lily, the distance between the millionaire and the street child dissolving into a shared need for truth. Her eyes, once filled with fear, now studied him with deep caution. She had seen his rage descending the stairs, but now she saw something different. The pain of betrayal, a father's anguish. "Tell me, Lily, from the beginning," he asked, his voice soft, but loaded with an urgency that made her understand that finally He was ready to listen. "And then," she told him. The words came out in a contained but precise flow. She described the first time she saw Isabella applying something to Leo's arm, the strange, deep sleep that followed. She recounted how she watched from the conservatory, seeing the scene repeat itself, not with a dropper, but with a moistened wipe, a subtler, quicker method. She described how Isabella always seemed to know the exact moment the baby would start feeling unwell, and how she conveniently had the antidote in her small, velvet pouch. Every detail Lily narrated fit into Arthur's last few weeks of anxiety and confusion, like pieces of a puzzle he had refused to assemble. "She never really wanted to hurt him," Lily whispered, her eyes fixed on his. "She just wanted him to need her, and for you to need her too." The simplicity of that observation struck him harder than any complex accusation. That was exactly it. Isabella hadn't created a crisis, but a dependency. She had made herself the hero of a problem she herself created, solidifying her place in his life through fear and gratitude. "And tonight," Lily continued, her voice trembling slightly as she remembered the scene, "I saw her in your room. She opened the safe, took pictures of the papers, and took the jewels, and she took your recorder. She spoke something into it and put it in her purse." The recorder. Arthur felt a chill. What could she have recorded? A confession? A threat? His mind worked feverishly. He needed that purse. "Stay here with Mrs. Henderson," he said, rising. His hesitation had vanished, replaced by a cold clarity. "Lock the door and don't open it for anyone." He returned to the party hall. The festive atmosphere now seemed grotesque, a macabre farce. He spotted Isabella near the main door, talking to a couple of guests, her posture elegant and relaxed. But he noted the way she held her small clutch, the velvet pouch lightly inside it, with a firmness that betrayed her nervousness. She was planning her escape. He approached, his face expressionless. "Darling, can we talk for a moment outside? I think the fresh air will do us good." Her smile wavered, but she couldn't refuse without raising suspicion. "Of course, my love." They stepped out onto the patio, moving away from the lights and music. The night was cold. "Arthur, what's happening? You're scaring me. Give me your purse, Isabella." The request was made in a low, almost casual tone, but the order was unequivocal. Her facade completely crumbled. Fear flashed in her eyes. "No." "Why?" "There's nothing in there." "Then you won't mind if I look?" He held out his hand. She took a step back, clutching the wallet to her chest. "You're being ridiculous. You're going to believe that lying girl instead of me." "She wasn't lying. I checked the safe, and now I'm going to check your purse." The argument attracted the attention of one of the security guards, who began to approach uncertainly. Isabella saw her chance. "Help!" she shrieked, her voice filled with manufactured panic. "He's threatening me, he's not well." Arthur's head spun. She was turning the tables on him, painting him as the unstable one, the aggressor. Guests started looking over, their expressions changing from curiosity to alarm. In his own home, surrounded by people who had known him for years, he was being made the villain. Isabella's trap was more complex than he had imagined. It wasn't just about money, it was about destroying him completely if he dared to challenge her. He was trapped. If he forced the situation, he would look guilty. If he retreated, she would escape with the evidence. Time was running out. Isabella's scream echoed across the patio, a false alarm that achieved its desired effect. The guests' faces turned toward them, conversations died, and a wave of murmuring spread like wildfire. The security guard, a burly man named Marcus, was now a few feet away, his hand hovering near the radio on his belt, his face a mask of confusion and duty. He looked from Arthur to Isabella, trying to decipher the scene. "Sir, is everything all right here?" Marcus asked, his voice respectful, but firm. "No, nothing is all right," Isabella cried, tears streaming down her face as if rehearsed. "Arthur isn't feeling well. The pressure, the stress with the baby. I think he's having a breakdown. He's accusing me of terrible things." The accusation was brilliant in its cruelty. She used Arthur's deepest vulnerability, his love and concern for Leo, as a weapon against him. To onlookers, her story was perfectly plausible, an overwhelmed single father finally cracking under the weight of responsibility. Arthur felt the ground vanish beneath his feet. He was surrounded by dozens of people, yet he had never felt so alone. With every passing second, Isabella's narrative solidified, turning him into an unbalanced man in the eyes of his own friends and colleagues. He looked at her face, at the poorly disguised triumph behind the tears, and realized that a direct confrontation was a trap. He couldn't use force. He needed a different approach. He needed time and evidence so undeniable that no acting could refute it. Taking a deep breath, he stepped back, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "You're right, Isabella. I don't know what came over me." His voice was low, shaky, and he hated himself for the weakness he had to feign. "The pressure has been too much. I apologize to all of you." The change in his demeanor was so sudden that it caught everyone by surprise, including Isabella. The tension on the patio lessened somewhat. Guests exchanged glances, now more confused than alarmed. Isabella, realizing she had won the round, pressed her advantage. "Oh, darling." She moved closer, trying to touch him, the compassion in her voice sounding obscene to Arthur. "I understand. I'm here for you. Let's go inside. You need to calm down." "No." He pulled away from her touch. "I need some air. The party is over. Please, ask your drivers to come. I appreciate everyone's attendance." The abrupt declaration ended the night. The guests, awkwardly, began to disperse. Arthur turned to Marcus. "Please, escort Ms. Isabella to the guest suite. Make sure she has everything she needs. And Marcus, do not let her leave the room, under any circumstances." The security guard hesitated, looking at Isabella. "But, sir..." "That is an order, Marcus. Just do it." There was an authority in Arthur's voice that the guard dared not question. Isabella opened her mouth to protest, but Arthur shot her a look that silenced her, a look that said, "The game is not over yet." She allowed herself to be led away, her calculating mind already working on her next move. As soon as the patio emptied, Arthur rushed to the kitchen. He opened the pantry door. "Lily, Henderson, come with me, quickly." He led them to his private study, a sanctuary of mahogany and leather, and locked the door. He sat in his chair, the adrenaline beginning to give way to deep exhaustion. He had contained the immediate crisis, but Isabella still had the jewels, and, more importantly, the recorder. She was isolated in a room, but she was a temporary prisoner. She could easily hide the evidence, discard it out the window, anything. "What are we going to do, sir?" Mrs. Henderson asked, worry creasing her face. Arthur looked at Lily, who was quiet in a corner, observing him. She didn't look frightened, but focused, as if trying to solve a complex problem. "She has the recorder," Arthur said, more to himself. "She recorded something on it. What could it be?" Lily stepped forward. "Maybe it's not what she recorded. Maybe it's what was already there." The girl's observation struck him. Of course, he used that recorder for everything. Meeting notes, reminders, random thoughts. He often left it running for long periods. If he had left it in his room, what could the recorder have captured before Isabella took it? Could it have recorded the sound of the safe opening, her voice talking to herself? It was a remote possibility, a desperate gamble, but it was the only one he had. He needed to recover that recorder, and he needed to do it before Isabella had a chance to erase its contents. The night was far from over. The battle for the truth was just beginning. The mansion was steeped in a heavy silence, an artificial calm that followed the storm of the party. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to amplify the tension in Arthur's study. He paced back and forth, his mind a web of strategies and scenarios. Isabella was locked in the upstairs guest suite, but that was a fragile solution. She was smart and manipulative. She was surely already planning how to reverse the situation, how to paint herself as the victim once more. Time was his enemy. "The guest room window overlooks the veranda roof," Mrs. Henderson said, as if reading his thoughts. "She can easily toss the purse out there. If the guard isn't attentive—" "He will be," Arthur assured her, though a pang of doubt troubled him. "But you're right. We can't wait until morning." He stopped pacing and looked at Lily. The girl was sitting in a chair, her small legs barely touching the floor, but there was a strength in her stillness that impressed him. She wasn't just a witness. She was the spark that had ignited this farce. "Lily," he said, his voice serious, "I need you to remember everything you saw Isabella do, every small gesture. You said she put the jewels and the recorder in her purse. Was it a big purse?" "No. It was a small clutch purse, but the velvet pouch was inside it, the one she always carries." The detail was crucial, the small velvet pouch, where she kept the vials, the antidote, the tools of her manipulation. Everything was together. Arthur walked to the desk, his fingers drumming on the polished surface. How could he get her to surrender the purse willingly? Force was out of the question. Cunning was his only weapon. An idea began to form, risky and theatrical, but one that might work. He turned to Mrs. Henderson. "Henderson, I need you to prepare some tea, chamomile, the strongest you can make, and put it on a tray with one of the silver teapots." "Yes, sir. And Lily, I need your help. You are the only one who can do this." He knelt down in front of her again, explaining his plan in whispers. The girl's eyes widened, a mixture of fear and determination shining in them. It was a massive request, one that would place her face to face with the woman who had terrorized her. But she nodded, a silent firmness in her gesture. Minutes later, Mrs. Henderson returned with the tray. Arthur took the teapot and went to a small cabinet where he stored some liquor bottles. He opened a bottle of strong brandy and poured a generous amount into the teapot, the sweet smell mixing with the chamomile. "What are you doing, sir?" Mrs. Henderson asked, shocked. "I'm creating a distraction," he replied grimly. He handed the tray to Lily. "Remember what I said. No matter what she says, don't answer. Just do exactly as we planned. I will be waiting on the other side of the door." Lily held the tray with both hands, the weight making her sway for an instant. She took a deep breath and left the study, ascending the stairs in silence. She reached the guest suite door. She knocked lightly. "Who is it?" Isabella's voice called out, cautious. Lily didn't answer. She just knocked again. The door opened a crack. Isabella looked out and saw the girl, alone, holding the tray. Her expression shifted from suspicion to contempt. "What do you want?" Lily took a step forward, pushing the door open and entering the room. She walked to the center table and placed the tray down, her hands trembling. Her eyes didn't meet Isabella's. Instead, they fixed on the woman's clutch, which was resting on the bed. Isabella followed her, furious. "Get out of here! Didn't you hear me? Get out!" Lily didn't move. With a deliberate motion, she picked up the silver teapot and tripped, spilling the hot, sticky tea all over the expensive leather clutch. "No!" Isabella shrieked, rushing toward the bed. "You stupid brat, look what you did!" While Isabella, in a panic, tried to clean up the mess, Lily stepped back, moving toward the door. Their eyes met for a second, and in Lily's gaze, Isabella saw not fear, but a silent challenge. It was then that she realized. The tray, the tea, the accident. It was a setup. Her attention had been diverted. She looked frantically toward the door. It was ajar. Too late. Arthur was already inside the room, silent as a shadow, his hand outstretched. "The purse, Isabella, now, or I call the police and tell them about the jewels and the recorder you stole. The choice is yours." Isabella's mask fell away, revealing the naked face of desperation and hatred. She was cornered, her queen captured in a move she hadn't foreseen. Slowly, her hand sticky with spilled tea, she picked up the clutch and tossed it at Arthur's feet. The battle was won, but the emotional war was about to reach its devastating climax. The silence in the room was so thick you could feel it. Arthur crouched down and picked the clutch up from the floor, the leather still damp and warm from the tea. He opened it on the table, ignoring Isabella's furious yet muffled protests. Inside, nestled between a red lipstick and a small mirror, was the velvet pouch, and beside it the digital voice recorder. Arthur's heart pounded as he picked it up. The small red recording light was off. With a trembling finger, he pressed play. The first thing heard was the sound of his own hurried footsteps, recorded hours earlier as he rushed upstairs. Then, the soft click of the safe door opening, followed by the unmistakable sound of paper being shuffled and the metallic clinking of jewelry. There was no doubt. The recorder, left on by chance, had become a silent witness. But it was Isabella's voice that sealed her fate. She wasn't speaking to anyone, just a whisper to herself, a monologue of triumph and contempt. "So easy," she murmured. "So blind. He thinks I'm a savior. The baby is the key. As long as he needs me, he'll eat right out of my hand. A few more weeks and everything will be mine." The recording continued, capturing the moment she picked up the recorder and spoke directly into it. "Just in case you become a problem, dear Arthur, a little insurance. No one would believe an unstable man like you wouldn't have fabricated all this." Arthur hit stop. The recording contained everything, proof of theft and the confession of her manipulation. He looked up and met Isabella's gaze. The defiance had vanished, replaced by a cold emptiness. She knew she had lost. He pulled his cell phone from his pocket and dialed the police. As he spoke to the operator, explaining the situation with an unnerving calm, Isabella didn't move. She just stood there, a statue of defeat. Lily, who had watched everything from the doorway, approached and, with an unexpected gesture, lightly touched Arthur's arm. He looked down, and the girl simply nodded, a silent gesture of support that meant more than any word. When the police arrived, there was no drama. Isabella was led away silently, without a final plea or accusation. The truth, once revealed, was irrefutable. As the police car drove away, taking with it the darkest chapter of his life, Arthur felt an immense weight lift from his shoulders. He looked at Mrs. Henderson, whose eyes were filled with tears of relief, and at Lily, who remained by his side, small but unwavering. He knelt down in front of the girl. "Lily, I can never thank you enough. You saved my son. You saved me." "I just told the truth," she replied, her voice soft. "You were always good to me." The simplicity of her loyalty moved him deeply. He had helped her with small, anonymous gestures, and in return, she had risked everything for him. In that moment, he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "I want you to stay, Lily, here, with us, if you want to, of course." The girl's eyes widened, and for the first time he saw her smile, a shy but genuine smile that lit up her dust-smudged face. "Really? Really?" he confirmed, his voice choked. "This is your home now?" Later, after Mrs. Henderson had taken an exhausted but happy Lily to a hastily prepared guest room, Arthur went up to see Leo. The baby was sleeping soundly in his crib, his breath regular and serene. For the first time in weeks, it was a truly peaceful sleep. Arthur placed his hand on his son's small chest, feeling the warmth and steady rhythm of his life. The tears he had held back for so long finally came, silent and cleansing. They weren't tears of sadness, but of liberation and overwhelming gratitude. He wasn't a perfect father, and maybe he never would be. But he had learned the hard way that being a good father didn't mean having all the answers, but being willing to listen to the truth, even when it came in the voice of a child the world had discarded. He had failed, yes, but he had also been saved, and that was a lesson he would never forget. 2 weeks later, Arthur's estate breathed a completely different air. The oppressive silence of anxiety had been replaced by the cheerful sounds of everyday life. Leo's laughter echoed through the halls as he clumsily crawled after a colorful ball, his movements full of the healthy energy that had been stolen from him. There were no more episodes of sickness. Isabella's shadow had dissipated like a morning mist, leaving behind a clear sky and the promise of a new beginning. Lily had adapted to her new life with remarkable resilience. Under the care of Mrs. Henderson, who treated her like the granddaughter she never had, she flourished, bathed and dressed in new, comfortable clothes. With regular meals and a warm bed, the girl seemed like a different person. But the deepest transformation wasn't visible. The caution in her eyes gave way to a bright curiosity, and her silence was gradually filled with questions about the world and shy laughter. She and Leo developed an unbreakable bond. She was his protector, his playmate, the first to cheer when he managed to stand alone, holding onto the sofa. Arthur, in turn, was rediscovering himself. The collapse of his life's perfect facade had liberated him. He delegated more responsibilities at his company, freeing up time for what truly mattered. Afternoons were no longer spent in front of a baby monitor, but on the living room rug, building block towers that Leo invariably knocked down with giggles. He learned to decipher his son's different cries, soothe his fussiness, and celebrate his small victories. The paralyzing fear of failure gave way to a humble acceptance that fatherhood was a learning journey, full of errors and triumphs. One sunny afternoon, Arthur was in the garden with Lily, teaching her how to tend the roses. He showed her how to prune the dry branches so new flowers could grow. Sometimes we have to cut away what's dead to make room for what's new and beautiful, he said, more to himself than to her. Lily looked up at him, her eyes large and wise. Like you did? Arthur smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. Exactly, Lily, like I did. He knew, in that moment, that the guilt that had haunted him for so long had finally begun to heal. He was no longer an emotionally reserved man, hiding behind walls of distrust. The trust he had placed in Lily and the loyalty he had received in return had reopened his heart. He was still careful, but his care no longer stemmed from fear, but from love. Mrs. Henderson appeared at the door with a tray of lemonade and cookies, with Leo in her arms, babbling happily. The four of them sat on the veranda, an unlikely family, forged not by blood, but by circumstances and courage. Arthur looked at them, his son safe and loved, the kind-hearted woman who was the pillar of that home, and the street girl who had proved to be the wisest and bravest of them all. He realized that true wealth was not in his safe or his bank accounts, but in that simple, perfect moment. The impeccable life he had tried so hard to maintain was a fragile illusion. True happiness, he discovered, lay in the beauty of imperfection, the strength of human bonds, and the ability to overcome adversity, not alone, but together. The collapse of his world had not been an end, but a rebirth. And under the blue sky of that afternoon, he felt for the first time in a long time truly at peace. He was a father, a friend, a guardian, and that, he finally understood, was more than enough.